What are you looking for, sir?
My anniversary episode is due next week, and once again, Bay's latest Transformers shitfest won't be out on time for me to review it. So I'm looking for another movie to bust next week. Whoa! What was that?
Our sensors are detecting strange readings, sir.
Well, for the time being, I'm gonna be filming a countdown. But just to be safe, go to Red Alert. And cue the opening sequence. Engage. Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. I'm Erod, and I'm the Blockbuster Buster. Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry's philosophical adventures in space exploration is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, and most recognized long-running sci-fi series of all time. It has influenced and inspired millions, leaving a very prominent fingerprint in our culture. Cause whether you love or hate Star Trek, the fact remains that without it, there would be no fanboys. In 1987, we were introduced to a new rebooted version of the beloved series, Star Trek: The Next Generation, which introduced us to a whole new crew. The android desperately trying to become more human, Data. The opinionated and astute Dr. Crusher. The Klingon torn between two worlds, Worf. The blind engineer and everyman of the group, Geordi LaForge. The advisor and heart of the team, Deanna Troi. The dashing and debonair second-in-command, Will Riker. And the one and only captain in the franchise that gives Kirk a run for his money, Captain Jean-Luc Picard. TNG still remains one of the most successful entries in the Star Trek universe, garnering 7 seasons. Oh! Ow! Oh! Ow! And 4 movies, 3 of which are moderately successful. But we're not here to talk about these. We're here to talk about the 4th one, Star Trek Nemesis. Now, before I say or do anything, I want to make it perfectly clear that I love this movie. In fact, this is one of those movies that I like that everyone else seems to hate. For this reason, we're gonna do things a little bit different today. Instead of me pointing out the 10 things about this movie that don't work and analyzing them, I am going to be pointing out the top 10 things that fans nitpick at and obsess over and why they don't bother me. So, before I begin, I would like to remind you that there will be spoilers ahead. So if you've never seen Star Trek Nemesis or Star Trek The Next Generation, you might want to stop the video here. But if you're ready to partake in the most notoriously negative nitpicks of the final voyage of the crew of the Enterprise D, NE, then stick around as I count down the top 10 Star Trek Nemesis nitpicks.
Number 10.
The cameos were fast and meaningless. Being as this was billed as the final voyage of the TNG crew, fans had huge expectations, so if any characters from the franchise made a cameo, it was expected to be for good reasons. But most of the cameos consist of a quick dialogue exchange and nothing else. Guinan, Admiral Janeway, Bryan Singer. Wait, what? Bryan Singer? What is the famed X-Men director doing in a Star Trek movie? Okay, it's a picture of Professor Xavier. And a picture of Captain Picard. Make your point! But the truly remarkable aspect of this nitpick is the main character who had a cameo and did nothing and people complain about. Guess which one is the character the fans felt should have had more screen time and more lines. Just guess. Wesley Crusher! Wesley freaking Crusher! Now for those of you who don't know, Wesley is the most detested character in TNG.
And since I am finished here, sir, may I point out that—
Shut up, Wesley.
On a ship that was crewed by 7 of the greatest space heroes ever, it just seemed pointless to have a meddlesome know-it-all prepubescent punk around. Now, please keep in mind, I'm talking about the character of Wesley Crusher. Will Wheaton is freaking awesome.
And they said he was a boy genius. What happened? If Beverly Crusher could see this.
Fine. You want me to reverse the polarity on this bowling ball and invert an inverse tachyon pulse to the anomaly at the end of the bowling alley? By my shipmates. Damn it!
So after 7 seasons and 3 movies of hoping that someone would shut him the hell up, he finally stays quiet and people complain?
Sir, I know this may finish me as an acting ensign, but
Shut up, Wesley.
Number 9.
How did Shinzong acquire a Soong-type android? The plot of the movie sees the TNG crew take on Captain Picard's evil clone, Shinzong, who wants to, among many things, to utterly destroy Picard and the crew of the Enterprise. He begins his vendetta by baiting Picard to come to the edge of the Romulan neutral zone, by planting a Soong-type android with the same positronic signature as Data on a nearby planet. Picard and the others investigate and the whole ordeal begins. Fans apparently are completely perturbed by the fact that Shinzong had a fully functional, be it less advanced than Data, Soong-type android, and the movie never explains how he got it. Now, as far as we know, Dr. Soong only made 5 androids, using technology and techniques that were far ahead of their time. 2 of these androids being Data and his evil twin Lore. Oh, it's a sci-fi show. Almost all the characters have an evil twin.
I gave you an order, Lieutenant.
I can so relate. Now, while an explanation as to how Shinzong acquired something so rare would have been nice, the ambiguity of this just doesn't bother me. Cause Shinzong had over 20 years to prepare for this moment. Hell, he already knows the Enterprise crew really well when they first meet.
Deanna Troy of Beta's. Empathic and telepathic abilities. Ship's counselor. All this I knew, but I never knew you were so beautiful.
You seem quite familiar with our personnel.
Oh, I am, Commander Riker.
So I just don't think it's that far-fetched that at one point he would have traveled to Omicron Theta, uncovered the secret room where Dr. Soong stored his other 3 androids, and stolen one.
You may go.
Where?
Out of my sight.
But here's the real question about the android that they found. Hey, Mr. E, you know what's my personal nitpick with this picture? Oh, hi, Fedora Freddy. No, I don't know. What is your own personal nitpick with this movie? That for a big budget blockbuster movie, it didn't bust a lot of blocks, if you catch my meaning. Yeah, it is true. Star Trek Nemesis is the lowest grossing out of all Star Trek movies. So, Fedora Freddy, how would you have changed this movie to ensure maximum success? Well, during the climax of this picture, I would have had Captain Picard team up with Chris Pine as Captain Kirk to fight Shinzong. And then, during the battle, I would have had Captain Kirk killed when a collapsing bridge falls on top of him.
If you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand.
Well, I have people to meet and deals to make. Catch you later, alligator. Oh well. Let's go back to talking about that android.
Number 8.
They let B4 run free on the ship. After they find the Data prototype B4, they just let him roam free on the ship. This pisses off a lot of fans, cause even casual viewers are aware that androids are faster and stronger than humans, meaning that B4 is a potential danger, and should have been sequestered to a more secure environment. To make matters worse, it turns out that he is actually a sleeper agent for Shinzong. Now, why does this immense amount of negligence not bother me? Well, as a lot of my fellow Channel Awesome reviewers have pointed out in the past, Starfleet is great at a lot of things. In ship security, not one of their strong suits.
Number 7.
The Romulans made peace way too easily. One of the recurring enemies of Starfleet from the very beginning were the Romulans. Many fans stood in protest when during the final battle of this movie, 2 Romulan warbirds appear and aid the Enterprise, after decades of conflict with the Federation. Some argue that the Romulans would have rather let Shinzon destroy the Enterprise first before they made their move against their common enemy. Frankly, their sudden dismissal of their long-standing feud didn't bother me at all. For 2 reasons. Something that was established immediately in Star Trek is that while the Romulans are set in their ways, they are not unreasonable Neanderthals.
Captain, I regret that we meet in this way. You and I are of a kind, in a different reality. I could have called you friend.
But I have not been mistreated. In fact, this human saved my life.
And my second reason why this doesn't bother me is because it fits with the theme of the movie, which is seeing yourself through a dark mirror, and how that can affect you. Both Picard and Data see what they could have become if they would have walked a different path. In the same vein, the Romulans see their views, beliefs, and government twisted by Shinzon to achieve his own sinister goals. So as far as I'm concerned, the Romulans seeing this renegade legally manipulate their system in such a manner would definitely justify them readdressing their views on the Federation, and at least momentarily declare peace with them.
Commander, when this is over, I owe you a drink.
Romulan ale, Captain.
Romulan ale should be illegal.
It is.
Alright, let's move on to Mira papi, you know what's a lover's #1 nitpick with this movie? Oh, here we go again. Go ahead, a lover, what is it? How they didn't give most of the main characters a lot to do and shit?
I agree. A lot of the series regulars didn't get a great deal of screen time.
Especially the most beautiful mamacita in all the series.
It would have been nice to see more of that pretty lady.
Everybody's favorite TNG mamacita, Counselor
Dr.
Troy.
Crusher.
Counselor Troy.
Dr. Crusher.
Counselor Troy.
Dr. Crusher.
Counselor Troy.
Dr. Crusher.
Counselor Troy.
Dr. Crusher.
Guys, I will not have petty squabbling while discussing the work of Gene Roddenberry, a man that believed that in the future humanity would achieve peace.
Dr. Crusher.
Counselor Troy. Stop. Man, how would Gene Roddenberry solve this? With a logical paradox. Alright guys, listen up. Both Troy and Crusher are very lovely ladies, but at the end of the day, they are still fictional characters that were created by Gene Roddenberry. So technically speaking, Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy are Gene Roddenberry. So you two love and admire the same wonderful person. Mira, Nerdo, you want to go to the arcade and shit?
I think I'm gonna go with you.
What did I say? Gene Roddenberry's a very beautiful man! Well, at least they're getting along.
Number 6.
The plot is not connected to the TV series. The movie claims that the creation of the Picard clone was part of an old abandoned Romulan plot to replace Picard with a spy and saboteur that would work in their favor during their conflict with Starfleet. This movie claims that the acquisition of Picard's necessary DNA sample to create the clone occurred during the course of the TV series. But as any TNG fan worth a salt can tell you, this is not true. Originally, Star Trek Nemesis was supposed to be a continuation of the TNG two-parter Unification, but the screenwriters couldn't figure out a way to make the connection work, so the concept was dropped. This is also why Denise Crosby's Romulan character Sela is not in this movie. The fans really wanted this movie to have a stronger connection to the series, as they all knew that it was going to be the last story. Plus, the last 2 times that the movies were directly connected to an episode from the series, the results were great. Most fans just felt that it was cheap for the film to have this fictional connection to a show that had so many great opportunities for possible launching pads for the storyline of this movie. Now, why doesn't this bother me? Because it is in the spirit of Star Trek, to explore the unexplored, to embrace the new. And while I agree that the execution of this plotline was very poor, I fully support the idea of Picard taking on a challenge he has never faced before, because that is what he does best.
Just hoping this isn't the usual way our missions will go, sir.
Oh no, number one. I'm sure most will be much more interesting. Let's see what's out there. Engage.
Now the next category deals with a very serious subject. Thus, I plan to approach it seriously. No jokes, no bullshit, just concise analysis. Number 5. The rape subplot. In the film, Shinzon's first lieutenant, played by Ron Perlman, has empathic abilities like Counselor Troy, which, for unexplained reasons, Shinzon uses to psychically rape Counselor Troy. The film never clarifies in what way this disturbing attack serves Shinzon's plans, and he never uses these empathic abilities to attack any other member of the crew. Troy is the only victim for no reason. Granted, this does lead to one of Troy's most triumphant moments in the entire franchise, when Troy turns the Viceroy's abilities against him and uses them to find Shinzon's ship in spite of being cloaked.
Remember me. Now.
When I saw this moment at the movie theater, it got a big cheer out of the audience. And while I agree that it is a bit of wonderful wish fulfillment, it doesn't excuse the fact that the setup for this moment was very tasteless. So, for this reason, this is one nitpick with which I fully agree with all of you. Rape is a very sensitive subject, and if one is going to use it as a plot device in a story, it should not be used in such a cavalier fashion. That is all I have to say on the subject. Now let's go back to our usual meaningless fanboy gripes.
Number 4.
This movie is a big fat Wrath of Khan ripoff. Oh yeah, think about it for a minute. A superior adversary who is willing to die to get his revenge, the crew suffers a great loss in order to defeat him, and in both cases, the captains contemplate the idea of being old and outdated. In Nemesis, this happens in the most literal way imaginable, since Picard actually faces off against a younger version of himself. Any kind of imitation of the Wrath of Khan is received very negatively by the fans. Hell, even J.J. Abrams got a great deal of criticism when he ripped off the Wrath of Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness. The difference is, this movie was a big success, while Nemesis was a big failure. So, why am I, a person who always protests when one movie rips off the other, not enraged by this? Well, for starters, it's Star Trek ripping off Star Trek. If it was another franchise ripping them off, I would be totally with you. And secondly, at least they ripped off a good Star Trek movie.
Captain Picard. Jean-Luc Picard.
By Captain James D. Kirk.
Man, there is just no beating Ricardo Montalban. Even though Tom Hardy is pretty good.
Not to mention incredibly handsome.
Go away before I sick the Ninja Turtles on you again. What was that?
It will not happen. I will break each and every shell before they get meters close to this pretty face.
Who are you?
Well, Elon must be shell-shocked himself if they think they can take down Boston's reckoning.
Boston's reckoning? That sounds familiar. Bane? But if you're Bane, then who's...
Iran, I'm coming for you.
Oh yeah? Well, actors who can actually deliver your dialogue correctly are coming for you!
Action.
You merely adopted the dark. Me, I was born in it. Disappointing.
And that is why that man is my hero. Alright, let's move on to one of the biggest nitpicks of Star Trek Nemesis.
Number 3.
The death of Data. This is the moment when most everyone pretty much checked out. Captain Picard is about to sacrifice himself to save the crew, but last second, Data shows up and takes his place.
Data?
There are literally dozens of fan theories as to how they could have solved this predicament without Picard or Data having to die. Personally, I don't care to entertain any of them. Because as far as I'm concerned, this was a noble end to one of the greatest characters in the franchise. It was always Data's goal to become human, and what is more humane than having the willingness to sacrifice yourself to save your friends? And of course, this leads to a very sentimental and beautiful ending.
First time I saw Data, he was leaning against a tree in the holodeck, trying to whistle. Funniest thing I ever saw. No matter what he did, he couldn't get the tune right. What was that song? I can't remember the song.
But the nitpicks don't stop there.
Number 2.
The Paradox. The infinite complaining about the death of Data doesn't just stem from the fact that they killed off a beloved fan favorite, but because his death creates an inconsistency in the timeline of the show. As in the final episode of TNG, All Good Things, we see a future version of the crew and Data is alive and well. Some, like me, interpret this as a possible future concocted by the Q Continuum. But I digress. The reason why this inconsistency doesn't bother me is because there have always been plot holes and inconsistencies between the shows and the movies. The most famous one of them all is when Khan recognizes Chekhov.
But you... I never forget a face. Mr. Chekhov.
Even though Chekhov wasn't even part of the crew in the one and only episode Khan was in the original series, Space Seed. My personal favorite continuity flux is in the TNG episode Relics, when they rescue Scotty from stasis and he says,
The Enterprise. I should have known. I bet Jim Kirk himself hauled the old gal out of mothballs to come looking for me.
Even though it is later revealed in Star Trek Generations that Scotty was present the day Captain Kirk allegedly died. So trust me when I say that Data's death is not the biggest inconsistency we've seen so far. Alright, it is now time for the biggest Star Trek Nemesis nitpick.
Number 1.
It's not as good as All Good Things. For those of you who don't know, the final episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, All Good Things, is considered to be one of the greatest TV show finales ever.
Goodbye, Jean-Luc. I'm gonna miss you. You had such potential. But then again, all good things must come to an end.
It's philosophical, it's high concept, and it is astonishingly brilliant, as we see the crew in 3 simultaneous timelines. And the show goes full circle, as it references the very first episode of the series. This is such a great episode that many feel that this is where the adventures of the TNG crew should have ended. But when the movie series began, a new ending for the series loomed in the horizon. And while I agree that All Good Things cannot be beaten, I still feel that Star Trek Nemesis was still a decent send-off to our great crew of intrepid space heroes.
Helmsman, lay in a new course. Take us to Romulus. Warp 8.
Aye, aye, sir. Course plotted and laid in.
Romulus. I'm afraid the Opal Sea will have to wait, number 1. Engage.
So those are my top 10 Star Trek Nemesis nitpicks. And you know what? I've heard every possible reason to dislike this movie. And I still love it. It was a bold and epic struggle all the way to the end, putting our heroes to the ultimate test, and they all performed admirably.
The Romulans fought with honor.
Yes, they did, Mr. Worf.
Every time I have a TNG-a-thon, I look forward to watching it. And I'm getting that signal again. These readings are so familiar. I've seen this before somewhere. Oh my Godzilla! A time displacement anomaly, I knew it. Another critic must be reviewing something Star Trek related. Now, there are two ways of getting rid of a time displacement anomaly. Number one, I can reverse the polarity of the... Or I could just run.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise.
Make it so. Make it so. Make it so. Make it so.
Duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, scientific truth, or historical truth, or personal truth. It is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. Now, if you can't find it within yourself to stand up, tell the truth, you don't deserve to wear that uniform.
This is becoming a speech.
You're the captain, sir. You're entitled.
Not entitled to ramble on about something everyone knows.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise.
Make it so. Make it so. Make it so. Make it so.
He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence.